This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
All of us are looking for a life of meaning and significance. A life that makes a difference in the world. A life that truly matters. We believe this is found through the right people, platform, and purpose. We call this movement 3. It starts with giving people greater health through the power of our proactive wellness products. 3's innovative formulas deliver demonstrable results by maximizing bioavailability and cellular absorption, ensuring people everywhere can enjoy the nutrition they need to operate at their best. Building on our foundation of people-focused products, we provide a platform for unparalleled entrepreneurship and personal growth. 3 is there beside you every step of your journey towards building a business and a better life. Finally, we know that a sense of real purpose, the kind that moves hearts, minds, and mountains, comes through serving and elevating others. This philosophy is reflected in our caring community, which bring hope and life-saving help to people around the world. It's time to redefine what's possible and activate your full potential. It's time to live a life of purpose. It's time for 3.
Hey, this is episode number 148 of the show World Awakenings, a fast track to enlightenment. I'm your host, Carl Gruber. Now, if you've been following the show since its inception in 2018, you've seen and heard some of the world's top experts, teachers, of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening. So with this show, we carry on that tradition. But first, I would like to take a moment to check out my ebook, The Jogger to Runner book. I may be a certified law of attraction life coach, but I am also an athlete who has run 78 marathons and is a running coach. In order to enjoy life, you need to have a healthy and fit body, and my book will show you how to slowly and gradually build yourself up from walking and jogging to running on a regular, consistent basis. So start with my book, now available for only $1.99. Just scan the QR code you see on the screen or click the link below in the show notes to get your copy. So now let's get to the matter at hand as we meet our featured guest for this episode, Dr. Nina Cerfolio. She has been a psychiatrist for more than 30 years and former chief of Psychiatric Emergency Room at St. Vincent's Hospital. She's the author of an incredible personal experiences of trauma, abuse, attack, sickness, and recovery, which she fully documents in her new book, Psychoanalytic and Spiritual Perspectives on Terrorism, Desire for Destruction, which recounts her experiences from being a first responder at the 9/11 destruction of the World Trade Center to being poisoned during the Second Chechan War to her recovery and eventually opening up to realizing there is more beyond the crazy world we see and growing spiritually and mindfully. In addition to having traditional psychiatric training, Nina has many years of spiritual training, which includes mindfulness techniques and daily meditation. So with that, Nina, welcome to World Awakenings. I'm so grateful to have you here.
Oh, it's so much pleasure to be with you, Carl. You're an inspiration, 7 to 8 marathons. Wow, I'm impressed.
Well,
that's awesome.
It's been a while since I've run a marathon, but the world record is well over 1,000 marathons. So.
I know. But still, 78 is awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, you're quite an athlete too, and we can dive into that stuff too. But Like I said, thank you for being on my show, and congratulations on your new book, Psychoanalytic and Spiritual Perspectives on Terrorism, A Desire for Destruction. What a title! And I've been reading it. It's quite the academic book with a lot of personal exploration on your part. Why this book and why now?
So I feel that it's so relevant to what is going on in the world today and America, with the number one cause of death in children in our country is gun violence. So that, and also that I survived two terrorist attacks, as you so eloquently stated. I went down to 9/11 as a first responder, and I helped a lot of people, and I wound up developing breast cancer and had a mastectomy. And then in 2005, I went down. Oh, I didn't go down. I went to Chechnya, which is in Russia. And I went into the second Chechen War, which Putin had waged the first Chechen War and the second Chechen War basically to come to power. And it was a genocide of Chechens. And I provided medical aid to the Chechens. And subsequently, I was poisoned by an FSB agent when I was there and almost died. I lived in a liminal space, actually. Between 3 years, I was so sick. I could barely get up out of bed. I had recurrent pneumonia. I developed food allergies. I developed chronic GI parasitic infections and other illnesses.
I think you said in your book that you were poisoned with anthrax. Do you even know how that was done to you?
I think he put it in my food or in my drink. And actually, it was man-made anthrax. So I was biologically tested on a Rife machine, which is a machine it's approved in Germany. It's not FDA approved here. And basically, it works by frequency. So it can identify, like, you have a frequency, I have a frequency, anthrax is a frequency. So I had a man-made anthrax throughout my body. And I found that out. So it basically took 3 years. I was dying. And then in 2010, which was 5 years after I was poisoned, I began to even muster to have the ability to sit up in front of my computer and begin to do medical research, extensive medical research. Thank God I was a doctor, so it was a lot easier. And I put the medical pieces of the puzzle together. And my best medical guess is that I was poisoned with man-made anthrax. I mean, I knew I was poisoned at the time, as if I was my own emergency room patient. It was very extreme symptoms. After being poisoning, I would get up and I fell. I never had issues with balance. I was an elite endurance athlete at that point. I had projectile vomiting, diarrhea. I had high fever, and there were no doctors there. I was one of the few doctors there, probably the only international doctor there. It was there to provide medical help. So it was a genocide I was in.
So I'm curious about a couple things. Number one, what drew you to Chechnya in the first place? Why there? I mean, there's other conflicts in the world, but also, why would this person choose you to poison? Did he do this to other of the doctors or people who were there to help?
So it's a great question. The reason why I was drawn to Chechnya is because it was the most dangerous place on earth in 2005. It was a largely ignored war. The West, meaning America, was very quick to join Putin's propaganda that it was a war against terrorism. And actually, the terrorism was on Putin's part. He actually was found to have planted the bombs that were under 7 different cities in Russia, killed hundreds, wounded thousands, and he blamed it on Chechen terrorists. And that was the reason why he went into Chechnya and killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. So I felt compelled to go to the place where people are marginalized, unseen, not thought of, because that's basically how I felt growing up. So I very much identified with them. And you asked me another question. Oh, why me? So why me was because I was the one most intent on helping the Chechens. I provided the medical care. I was with a man who ran an internationally disabled running club, and he was really more concerned to be quite frank, with getting publicity for his running club, and really wasn't that concerned with helping the Chechens. So I provided medical care to the Chechens. I also worked for 3 years to get 3 of the boys that we had met there back for free medical care for like about a month. So why me? Primarily because I cared about the Chechens and I was helping them medically. But I think also because I was a woman, I was a psychiatrist, and I was an elite endurance athlete, all which really seemed to agitate him.
Well, the other thing I'm curious too, I mean, the other major experience you had was being a first responder when the World Trade Centers went down. Now, you're a psychiatrist, and but you worked at St. Vincent's, I believe.
Yes.
And what was it? Just were you just drawn to be like you are to that area because people needed help? Is that why you were on the scene helping with that too?
Yeah, I ran the Psychiatric Emergency Room at St. Vincent's in the walk-in clinic. I think I've always been drawn to helping people that were bullied growing up in school. I always stuck up for them. I always helped them. I've always been a voice for people who are marginalized. I've tried to help people who are marginalized, who aren't seen, people with mental health issues who are stigmatized and ostracized and shamed. So yeah, I was always drawn to that because I think I felt marginalized growing up, essentially. So I identify with that very much.
So you had breast cancer surgery after being part of a 9/11 rescue. You got poisoned in Chechnya. What toll was did it take on your body and mind after the trauma you experienced?
So it took a tremendous toll on my body. At the time I was an elite endurance athlete, and when I came back, I could barely get up out of bed. I mean, I kept on pushing myself to try to do things, and if I pushed too hard, I would get recurrent. I had recurrent pneumonia maybe 200 times. As a result of anthrax poisoning, it laid me low, it humanized me, and it really taught me to slow down, to embrace my imperfections, my vulnerabilities, which I had been literally running away from, to super perform, right? I had been brought up that I needed to super perform in school, in my career, in athletics. And it was this constant battle of overcoming childhood feelings of being unseen, unloved, unrecognized, not worthy, to then win or perform to my best to momentarily overcome those feelings. And I couldn't do that anymore. So it was a brutal lesson. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I literally for 3 years was closer to death than to life. And actually, the gift was that when I was closer to death, I had this amazing spiritual awakening that I felt this incredible expansiveness. I felt an incredible connection to God or the cosmos, however you want to look at it. And it was this amazing, joyful, uplifting feeling, ironically, right? When I'm feeling like I'm dying. But it really expanded me, and I began to embrace not only my own humanity, but other people's humanity as well.
Well, yeah, we're gonna dive a little deeper into your spiritual awakening here, but I'm just curious too, regarding your two wild and crazy experiences with your body there. You and I are both endurance athletes, and when we live at a level of high level of fitness, many of us feel like we're invincible, and then something like this happens. But I'm sure because you were in such excellent fitness shape, you were able to deal or survive with something as drastic as this, where it might have killed other people.
Absolutely. It would have killed anyone else. I remember when I got out of bed in Chechnya, we were in Ingushetia, which is the neighboring province to Chechnya. And I got out of bed because I was determined. I felt horrible. I had a high fever. I felt malaise. I didn't have nausea and vomiting anymore, but I had a horrible headaches. I was determined because we were going to Grozny, which is the capital of Chechnya, and Grozny at the time was surrounded by the Russian army. I've never seen so many. Well, actually, I'd never seen any Russian tanks. That was the first time I saw Russian tanks, and the military, literally like thousands of Russian tanks, had a stranglehold on Grozny. So we had to go through checkpoints. And the only reason why we got through or even into the country, because we were shadowed by this FSB agent, which, by the way, I should say he wasn't presented to me as an FSB agent. I figured it out like probably within an hour after meeting him. I've never looked into the eyes of any living being and seen such cold hatred. I mean, he was a professional killer, and I got that right away. So yeah, no, he was presented to me as a sports journalist, writer, sports journalist.
Wow.
Yeah. I forgot yeah, I think most people that would have been poisoned would have died. I was in incredible shape. At the time I had 8% body fat. Now I have about 30% body fat, just to give you an example. Like I weigh 130 now, I weighed 110 then. And I lost about 10 pounds. I'm 5'6". I didn't have 10 pounds to lose there in Chechnya. Wow. So I was cachectic. I was a ghost of myself. I was wizened. I was sickly. I turned into a sickly immunocompromised patient. I still have chronic immunosufficiency issues, actually, but I'm a very determined person, so not much is going to keep me down unless I'm dead.
Did your profession of being a psychiatrist help you deal with these extreme conditions?
I think so. I mean, I understood his rage, his anger. He was a sociopath and a narcissist. So I'm a psychiatrist. I've dealt with just even running the psychiatric emergency room at St. Vincent's. There were many, many people who were arrested for various crimes who I dealt with. Also, I was consultation liaison attending at Bellevue, and I dealt with a lot of patients who were arrested, actually in the penal system there on a unit they have. So I could understand him. I could understand his rationale. I could understand, this is his job. This is what he's been trained to do, is to kill dissidents. And I certainly was a dissident because my heart was in helping provide medical care to Chechens who were being slaughtered. They were being killed. I mean, there were so many stories I heard from Chechen families of the children that their fathers were abducted, never to be heard from again. Mothers were raped, sisters were killed, they were maimed. And in my book, I actually document, and now I forget his name, but one of the Russian, he was in the army. He actually was responsible for shooting down the Ukraine airline, which Russia blamed on Ukraine, but he was the one who shot them down. And he also basically wrote a memoir, but said he couldn't publish it because he basically admitted that he took Chechen men from their house and killed them, and that they'll never be heard from again. So it is documented that this happened. I don't know how many hundreds of times I heard that from Chechens.
Well, this is unfortunately a scenario that has played itself out thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times throughout human history. I mean, maybe a show like this and beautiful guests like you coming on will help us maybe to get out of that cycle. But, let's go back to your spiritual awakening. Now, in your book, you point out that in Carl Jung's version of Christianity, the crucifixion represents two aspects of the world. The horizontal beam represents the materialistic world of doing, and the vertical beam represents the spiritual realm of being. I love this analogy. What exactly does this mean, and what does it mean to you in your own practice?
Yeah, so the major gift of anthrax for me was that I learned how to stop doing, how to stop trying to super perform, to be loved, to be recognized. I was so desperate. And it only lasted an instant. I won the half marathon on the China Wall. That high was great. I was the only American who ran it. It was mostly Germans and Chinese and Italians, but the feeling lasted it was so transient. It wasn't very long. And what it taught me was to just be. I didn't have to do anything. I could just be. And that lesson, it sounds so simplistic, but it's not. It's for someone who's used to continually being in action and doing things, it becomes very addictive on many levels. And to just be, to meditate, to be, and I'm still learning these lessons, by the way. It's not like I'm the most enlightened person on the face of the earth. I'm not. I still need to slow down, to listen to my body, to just be, to not be judgmental of myself, to not beat myself up that I'm not out there running Ironman right now. I really am focusing on my book. A tremendous lesson of just being more interconnected with the universe, and that I feel safe in my body, that I'm loved and I am seen. That's a beautiful lesson.
And what I really love about Jung's analogy of the horizontal beam and the vertical beam. I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, non-dualistic spirituality, and this is so in alignment with the horizontal beam being our 3D world where we imagine time exists. There's a moment keeps going. We imagine time. There's always this timeline, but on the vertical beam, in true reality of back home with source, there is no time. So everything is on a vertical plane. There's only now. And that's what I loved about that analogy. So no wonder Jung was famous.
Yeah, no, he's brilliant. And he's so brilliant. And he was one of the few psychiatrists, psychoanalysts that was very spiritual. That's why I particularly love him. I mean, there are others like Ferenczi was very spiritual as well, but Jung embraced it more, I would say, and wrote about it more. So he's definitely one of my heroes.
Well, I'd like to go back a little more into your personal life. Again, I've been reading your book. Now, in that book, you talk about how your mother was hypercritical and demeaning of you when you were young. What role did this play in your psyche in dealing with all that was thrown at you during these difficult years?
Yeah, I think that my mom and I both suffer, and I forget now the name of the woman who said this, but she wrote for the Village Voice when it actually still existed.
Mhm.
And she said, every generation there's daughters and daughters and daughters and daughters born, and then every so many thousand years a mother is born. And I think we both suffered from that saying, which is, my mom grew up very poor. She was the oldest of 12 children. She grew up in Cicero, in Illinois. Excuse me. And she basically had to be a mom to her brothers and sisters. She worked her way through college. And then she met my dad. She was a singer. Actually, she sang with jazz band, and she wanted to do that. But I don't think she had the faith in herself to do that. I mean, my mother was gorgeous. She was a Miss Cicero, absolutely beautiful, great voice. But I don't think she had a deep faith in herself. And so, not that there's anything wrong with marrying my father, but I think she resented my father's. So my father also was very poor. He grew up with a father who came here from Italy when he was 16, and he was a farmer. And my dad grew up incredibly poor. Also, he put himself through college and eventually medical school. And he felt unseen, unloved. And his dad was very critical of him. And I feel like he married his dad because my mother was hypercritical of him, would tell me, never marry a man like your father. He's horrible. It was the biggest mistake of my life, and on and on and on and on. So really, I think that my mother taught me eventually how to have more empathy for people that just are not happy with themselves in their life, who for whatever reason didn't have a faith in themselves to really pursue what they wanted to, because I really do think she wanted to be a singer. But she gave up on herself. So she was a medical technologist. She did run my dad's office, but yeah, she was very critical of me. A lot of I feel her issues with her mother. So she was very embarrassed that her mother kept on getting pregnant. So for instance, she would say to me, and I should say I didn't even really date till I was 18 because I felt in my family if I dated, then I was a slut and whore, pretty much was just what they said. So she would, basically say those things to me when I wasn't dating. And it was all the, undigested sorrow, shame, embarrassment of her mother that then got put on me. I mean, that's just one example.
Well, it's interesting. Me, never having had children, but I understand that, parents say, well, there's no manual on how to do it, and unfortunately, it's interesting that one generation carries their own traumas over to the next, and they just repeat the cycle and over and over and over again. And we would hope at this point in time in human history that we're starting to see that we can stop doing that. And somebody like you with a spiritual awakening is really beautiful. One of my colleagues in the coaching world, my friend Eleni, who lives in New Jersey, she's doing a Empower Mentor program for children. And she has seen these, she went through that type of cycle herself, and now she's determined to empower the kids so that they don't have to carry these psychological or even physical traumas into adulthood.
Absolutely. And I think that was trying my work in Chechnya, which was mostly with children, that I was trying to show them that someone cares about them, someone sees their suffering, someone loves them, and someone's doing something about it, providing medical care to people that had really extensive medical injuries. I mean, life like amputees, one had his penis blown off. I mean, severe medical injuries.
Wow, yeah, being a guy, I'd say that was definitely severe.
Yeah, horrible, horrible.
Wow. Well, again, your amazing book. Let me go back here and make sure it's got a long title. It is
If you remember just desire for destruction, so I don't even say the psychoanalytic and
Oh yeah,
spiritual aspects of
Fire.
terrorism. I just say desire for destruction because I think that it's too much. It's a mouthful. It's too much. In retrospect, I did try to just change it to desire for destruction, but unfortunately, my publishers were not very flexible.
Well,
So
it's quite the academic book, and the academics like long titles, right?
yes, that's true too. They like that.
But what I want to say is your book is already considered to be an important academic work that makes a call to action for more compassionate, holistic approach to addressing this complex issue of terrorism in our world. Why is this important?
Oh, it's so important. So I really feel that all of the mass shootings and the terrorism in this country is is an indicator of how healthy or sick our society is. So what each individual does makes a difference. So if you see someone who's being bullied, shunned, who's ostracized, and you don't do anything, that has a consequence that reverberates for all of us. There's a TED talk, and now I forget the man's name, but the name of the TED talk was I Was Almost a School Mass Shooter. And he basically grew up in a family that moved constantly. He grew up poor, so he didn't have the right clothing. He was bullied and ostracized in school. I think he just had depression. I don't think he heard voices telling him to kill, but he planned to go into his high school and to get revenge for being isolated, marginalized, and basically forgotten. And he went to say goodbye to next door neighbor, and the friend said to him, you don't look right. Why don't you come in, have something to eat, let's talk. That changed everything. He didn't go through with his plan to be a mass shooter. And that's what my book is about. It's about whether we do nothing, there's a consequence, or whether we do something positive, there's a consequence. And I really feel that the violence in our country is an indicator of the spiritual crisis in our country. And I love Joe Biden for this because he talks about it all the time with how divided we are, how divisive we are, how everyone just wants to win, win, win. And we can't listen to each other's opinions, especially if they differ from us, in an open and free and respectful dialogue. And this is what we need. We need to really love each other, be kind to each other, especially in my mind, those who are really struggling. And they need also to get psychiatric care if they're suffering. They also need love and support. And I just feel in this country that, so many people now are so paranoid about their own safety and their own self-interest, and they don't even see, like, Ethan Cromley is a great example of this, the Oxford mass shooter, and his parents are on trial now for really, in my mind, their responsibility in creating this violence, which was, here was an adolescent boy who was isolated his whole life. His parents never let him socialize with people, isolated him. Even the next door neighbor had written an article saying, I knew my next door neighbor was going to turn into a mass shooter. She tried to babysit him for free so that he would have more social interactions. The parents denied it. And I guess when he was younger, she took him on vacation with her son in an attempt to get him out and socialize. But basically, he was hearing voices. He had paranoid ideation in his home, which is not surprising because his family didn't pay any attention to him. He had suicidal ideation, and he begged his parents for psychiatric care. They laughed at him. They told him to suck it up. And I should say this is all according to the newspaper. And then when he was actually in school, caught drawing a picture of a gun with blood everywhere, and then he wrote, blood everywhere, the thoughts won't stop, please help. His parents were called in. Parents didn't bother to tell the school that the father had bought him a gun, and the mother had taken him to shooting range and taught him how to load and fire the gun. And the school said, please take him. This is a homicidal, now homicidal kid. They also had called him in with suicidal ideation. The parents also refused psychiatric care or to bring him home, and they put him back in class. But they put him back in class this time, and he became a mass shooter. And because the school didn't think to look in his backpack, but the parents didn't tell the school that he had a gun. I mean, this is unbelievable to me. And this is a child who felt so isolated, betrayed, alone, by not only his parents, but by classmates, by teachers, by the principal, everyone, that he said the reason for his shooting is he wanted to teach his classmates. In particular, he wanted to teach the prettiest girl in the class how alone they all are. And when you're 15, you don't have a perspective of anything else. You just know what you know, and that was his existence. And it's just such a preventable tragedy. And it's so sad to me, because even if minimally they had brought him to see a board certified psychiatrist and get on the right medication, which would have been antipsychotic medication, he wouldn't have heard voices anymore very rapidly, actually in 10 days. And he would have felt a lot better. He would have felt more importantly, he would have felt supported and seen.
Well, this penchant for bullying and cruel treatment, unfortunately, is so rampant throughout the world. And as a spiritual student, we learn that as individuals, we have a deep sense of guilt, feeling that we've separated ourselves from source, and that we project our guilt feelings onto other people's and things, thinking that by getting rid of it onto them, that we'll be clean. But it just the cycle keeps going over and over and over again. And it is astounding in this 3D world of 8 billion people how much bullying and attack is going on. Unfortunately, I go on and look at the videos on Twitter or X, whatever it's called, and I'd say about every 3rd or 5th video is some type of fight or screaming or
Absolutely.
bullying. And so many videos of young people beating each other up,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think social media, in fact, I was just quoted in the New York Post on this, that it's so toxic to teens, in particular teens' mental health, because they're developing, and it creates this herd mentality. It stifles their originality, creativity. And it basically causes this dopamine brain where they have to go on and watch these videos that are personalized by an algorithm on TikTok to get you like to keep on looking and be more addictive and have this feel good feeling. And it keeps you from being engaged in your life or learning how to be social with people. And it's really, it can be quite destructive. And if you're bullied as a teenager, a lot of these children then feel shame and they kill themselves, which is in the article, the mother was suing TikTok with 5,000 other parents because her daughter had become suicidal and really depressed.
Why is it when there is a school shooting, there's so many imitators? What is it about a person walking in a school or wherever at a mall and shoots that causes other people to imitate? They evidently think it's something they should imitate and like it.
Yeah, so this is very much a topic that I cover in my book, which is, when you're marginalized, when you're ostracized, when you're shunned, when you're humiliated, you have this sense of being unworthy, of not belonging, and being impotent, quite frankly. And mass shooting is this glorious, I'm not that I've ever shot a gun, but it must be this glorious addictive feeling of being incredibly potent, incredibly powerful. You get all this attention. You feel it gives you a distorted sense of belonging. Often, a lot of the adolescent mass shooters that I studied and other mass shooters, they would blog on like neo-Nazi websites or like websites such as that. And then they felt a sense of empowerment, belonging, being seen, being recognized, being supported, encouraged. And it's really a distorted sense of all that because it's not true belonging or not truly being seen. They're just being egged on to be violent and they're actually being exploited. But I think that because often it is marginalized people that resort to these feelings, that it makes them feel like they count, like they matter. And maybe for a moment they do.
Yeah, I could see that. They're actually saying, "Oh, look, people actually noticed me. I'm
Right.
here."
Right. They went from invisible to incredibly visible. Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth here between this amazing topic of terrorism and these shootings back to spirituality. Again, in your you have an interesting chapter in your book, and it's titled "Healing Ocular Vision While Opening and Expanding My Noetic Eye." Now, in this chapter, you state, "I came to see my suffering as the price I had to pay for awakening to a greater truth about myself and the world." Could you explain this?
Definitely. So, I would love to talk about my encounter with Molly, this wild whale, which was also in that chapter.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I've been
Okay.
looking forward to
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah. So basically, in 2012, I was paddleboard surfing. The only time I've been paddleboard surfing, and I took a lesson. It was with a man who was a photographer of wildlife, which was his professional uh, job. And we went out really far. I took to the paddleboard really easily, and it was really calm as well that day. It was in Laguna Beach, California. And I eventually, when we were coming back, so it was in January where migratory whales go from from the Arctic down to Baja California to deliver their babies, and also to uh, procreate. So when I was paddleboard surfing, all of a sudden this magnificent wild gray whale, and it turned out she was pregnant because my instructor told me that. He was about 30 feet off. I was 15 feet from her. She literally came up 15 feet in front of me, like a balloon rising from the water. I mean, it was that unbelievable, like hovering almost like a hummingbird, and looked me literally we had and looked me dead in the eye. Her left eye looked me dead in the eye, literally from coming up to the water to spy hopping, which is when they vertically rise out of the water, like 2/3 of her body. And I had this incredible spiritual awakening. So I had already been on my spiritual journey, but it just solidified it that this was my mystical mother. I had beckoned her, she had beckoned me. And then she came up again about 20 feet from me. And my instructor, he had a camera, but he missed her spy hopping me. He only got her footprint in the water when she pushed away from me, because I believe she did not want to be photographed. And he said how lucky I was, but I knew it had nothing to do with luck. I knew I had beckoned her that day and she had beckoned me. And we had lived like many, 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 many lifetimes together. And she was the most intelligent, wise, loving human, not human, but living thing that I've ever encountered. And it was this walnut-sized brown eye that just taught me how to think and to listen and to feel without any words. She taught me how to feel loved and nurtured and seen. She taught me how to embrace my humanity. It was the most magnificent moment, I think, in my life, actually. Wow. And it was being chosen by this whale. I felt a captive, before to my mom, before this happened. And I began to be able to glimpse the breadth of the world through this life-altering experience that I had. I call her Molly. I call her Molly in the book. And I actually did go down to Baja. There's this whale encounter you can go down to, and I kissed like maybe 8 whales. And I was looking for my Molly, but I didn't find her. But it was an amazing experience, and I highly recommend it. You can go down in these little boats, and whales will come up to you. It's just an amazing experience. And I was looking for her, but I didn't find her. So, but it was, she just gave me this sense of expansive freedom and beauty, and that I belonged. It was a corrective emotional experience, one that I didn't have growing up. Like she was fat and womb-like and embracing. I felt a kinship with her. I felt an attunement with her. I mean, here's this massive wild animal who could have easily thrown me off my paddleboard. And she was mindful to keep it like 15 feet from me. They speak about the 10-feet barrier in terms of when you're that close to a whale, it's like really overwhelming. And she was 15 feet from me, and I just froze. I was gobsmacked. I was so astounded at the beauty and the wisdom of this living being.
In your book, you speak also of spiritual knowing. Well, that encounter was spiritual knowing right there, all in a few instants.
It was amazing. It was like we were suspended in time. I mean, it probably was only a couple minutes, but the sense of time was forever. It was so expansive, and it just altered me. It really altered me. It altered how I worked with patients. It altered how I felt about myself. It taught me a new way to really listen and feel without using words. She taught me all of this in, seconds.
Well, while we're on that topic, so in a spiritual sense, what does knowing mean?
Very good question. Knowing, it's so with some things, it's very intuitive. Like I think what she gave to me was something very intuitive. It was something that you can't even really describe in words. Like I've tried to describe what she gave to me, and I really still haven't gotten to what she gave me. But it was this knowing. It was a knowing that I was always loved. I was always seen. Like even now, I feel like crying, that I was always embraced by the universe. And I didn't know that as a child.
Wow. Wow, I love that. That's a simple, beautiful little explanation. I love it. Again, referring to your beautiful book, Desire for Destruction, you have a chapter, interesting title, like all of them, Terrorism as a Perverted Negative Form of Attachment and Spirituality. So we're talking about spirituality. How does spirituality play in that?
Right. So it was a little bit about what I was talking about before, which was that so many of these terrorists and mass shooters that I've studied really are people that are marginalized, ostracized, invisible people, people that probably most of us would walk across the street from, people that are, hearing voices and homeless, or just people that are shunned from mainstream society. And that often if they're a terrorist, an international terrorist, they're recruited by people. Usually the recruiters are narcissistic and they exploit these suicide bombers, for instance, and the bombers are depressed. International terrorists are different because, for instance, Muhammad Atta, who was the man who flew the first plane into the World Trade Center, he was highly educated. He came from a very wealthy family. But his father mocked him for looking effeminate. I don't know if you know what he looked like, but he had very long eyelashes. He was very effeminate looking. He had an ethereal beauty to him. And the father would mock him as being a mama boy and call him like mama's little bird. He was Egyptian. And with someone like him, his actions very much were to try to overcome feelings of being impotent and emasculated. And also in that instance, there was the whole Muslim sense of needing to be purified of his sins. So he actually purified his body, as did a lot of the other 9/11 terrorists. And they had a spiritual ritual of purifying themselves. And basically, he felt that if he dated women or listened to music or went out to bars, that these were all mortal sins that you had to pay a price for. And he very much projected those sins that he had for a while before he got really, really kind of strictly religious. But he was an engineer, for instance. He was trained as an engineer. And he projected it into people on the West who listen to music, they go to movies. I don't cover my face, which are, dating. These are all mortal sins. And basically, the biggest purification of a sin is fire, right? So the fires of 9/11, I'm sure he thought purified him and us Western sinners. But many of these terrorist and mass shooters get a perverted sense of belonging, of being connected. So I think that he, for instance, Muhammad Atta, got a sense of the fact that, he is powerful. He is masculine to his father, who would really beat him up and was highly critical of his masculinity, and that he was proving how potent he was. And also that he was repenting for these sins that he had during various times in his education, like dating women or listening to music. So it gives you a perverted sense of attachment. It gives you a perverted sense of belonging, but it's not true belonging or attachment. And it's very much dissected and covered in my book. Yes.
Well, and I just want to remind the viewers and listeners, we are speaking with Dr. Nina Cerfolio, author of an amazing book, Psychoanalytic and Spiritual Perspectives on Terrorism, Desire for Destruction. You can just use that final part referring to the book. Just amazing stuff. And Nina, obviously, right now here in this year of 2024, there's probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of potential, shooters or terrorists out there. What can somebody watching or listening to this do on their own right now to turn the tide and maybe help these people join humanity in a compassionate, loving way?
Yes. So first, I want to say, if you're a family member in particular, you have so many things that you can do. If you have a family member that's hearing voices telling them to kill, that has paranoid ideation that people are trying to hurt them, that is homicidal, is suicidal, that you need to get them urgent psychiatric care, that there is no shame in having a psychiatric illness. There's no shame. in being psychotic. There's no shame in being depressed. There's no shame in being bipolar. These are medical illnesses that are similar to having a heart attack and needing medication, or diabetes and needing insulin, but they are an urgent medical psychiatric case where you need to secure immediate psychiatric treatment and medication. And that families have the ability to do that in this country, even against the will of their family member. So that I would stress is the first thing. But if you see someone who's being mocked, bullied, shunned, just reach out to them. Show them that someone cares, someone sees them, someone loves them. Just even like a smile to someone like that can make the difference in their day. And the example I used in the TED Talk, I was almost the mass shooter. It was just simple kindness, like simple kindness, giving, feeding someone, being kind, supportive, listening to someone. Just simple things can make the difference between stopping someone from being violent and feeling rage and wanting retaliation, which are all human feelings. We've all felt that way. We might not act on it, but I don't think most of us are isolated and shunned. And then these children are having voices telling them to kill, and their parents refuse to get them psychiatric care because I guess in many instances they feel ashamed of mental illness. Many of the family members, the parents that I studied, knew their child was hearing voices telling them to kill. Some of the kids were blowing up explosives in the backyard in a futile attempt to get rid of the voices. Like, they don't know what's going on. These are children. And the parents threatened to send them to military school or mocked them and told them to suck it up and didn't get them psychiatric care. In my book, that is abusive. I'm sure if the child was bleeding to death, they would have brought them to an ER to get help. And there's no difference here. This is a psychiatric emergency room, and it's no different than having a heart attack or any other medical illness that needs treatment.
Now, in my mind, medication would be a stopgap version of help to help them get to a point in their clarity in their mind where they can improve in understanding and get out of the psychosis. But unfortunately, we also hear a lot about over medication. I mean, that would definitely fall on the doctor prescribing it, right? By misanalysis.
Yeah, no, there are side effects to any medication, even aspirin, but a lot of these medications can cause sedation. So it's a matter of balancing the pros with the cons. But one of the adolescent mass shooters that I studied, he heard three male voices, one telling him to kill, another telling him that he was a horrible person, and then the third male voice was criticizing the other two. He was blowing up explosives in the backyard to stop the voices. Parents knew about his voices. The father withheld family history of schizophrenia to a treating psychologist, and then they stopped his treatment anyhow, right before the shooting. And he killed his parents because he basically said that they couldn't endure the shame of him being a mass shooting. And he went to his high school and he killed many classmates. And then miraculously, he survived, because most of them don't survive. He finally got an adequate psychiatric workup in jail, which is the irony of all these shooters. They don't get adequate psychiatric care, but when they're in jail, they get the adequate psychiatric care that they were deprived of. And literally within 10 days, he said, I feel so remorseful that I killed my parents and these classmates. The antipsychotic that he got stopped his auditory hallucinations. He actually got his GED degree. He got his BA degree. He's this voracious reader of all these classical literature. And he teaches yoga to his fellow inmates in his prison. And he's also the electrician in his prison. And he's like this role model, and he'll be in jail the rest of his life. So this was totally preventable. This was easily preventable if the parents had just listened. So much of my book is just can we have empathy for people suffering? Can we really listen? Or are we so self-involved, which we all are, me included? Like, I get caught up in my day with patients and, doing an interview, and then am I gonna really listen to my husband? So making time to listen to our loved ones, to provide care to our loved ones. And I think a big issue in this country is really, can we reconsider how we parent? Can we really be involved with our child? Can we be there by their side to support them and let them know that we love and care about them, and that we're going to help them no matter what, and that they'll get the care through whatever they need care for, even auditory hallucinations, which actually, even though it's frightening and all of us are capable of being psychotic, is very treatable with medication.
Well, Dr. Nina Cerfolio, I have to say that your life's journey is pretty darn amazing, and I'm get your book. I will have the link to get a copy of your book in the show notes for this program, and definitely read that. And it sounds like perhaps you're in the best place you've ever been mentally.
I would say I'm definitely in the best place I've ever been, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. I have love in my life. I'm in a great place. And I'm going to say, keep on running your marathons. I'm totally inspired by you.
Well, I'm going to come and meet you. Maybe we can run a half marathon together.
Oh my God, I would love it.
You're faster than I am.
I'm not very fast right now. And I have to run on trails because my knees and hip can't take it. If you can find me a half marathon on trails, I'm there.
I'll send you a link. I know a lot of them. So.
All right, great.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful help you are to the world, and thank you.
Thank you. That means so much to me. Thank you so much, Carl. Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.